Hi, this is Jeff Blauette, technical agronomist with Cooperative Farmers Elevator. And in this week's Field Friday segment, I kind of wanted to touch on something that we're starting to notice out in the fields now, and we're getting here towards the end of August, but we had a fair amount of beans get planted in April, and we've talked about that before. There's some benefits to that, but we're starting to see a little bit now as some of these beans, the earlier maturity varieties out in these April planted beans, are actually starting to turn a little bit now. We've got a lot of these beans in that stage are nearing R6 or at an R6 growth stage. R6, one of the pods on the top 4 nodes of the plant, look like, we have here, kind of like lima beans. Those beans fill that cavity, and they basically, those beans in that particular pod actually have accumulated all the dry matter they're going to. They'll only shrink back from there, but there'll be other pods that'll be doing some of that, shortly after that in these beans, but the earliest pods are showing like that. So when we get to R6, we're done growing any more plant height. We just start to see some of those lower leaves maybe starting to get a tinge of yellow. That plant maybe doesn't look quite as dark green. As you drive around the country, you'll start noticing that here in the next week or two. But as we walk along here, you can kind of see what it looks like on the ground. You'll notice some of these lower plants and the lower parts of the plant are starting to show some color. This maybe wouldn't quite show from the road yet, but I bet it will in a few days. So this looks like one of those years we're probably going to have some beans combined in September. When we get to R6, we're kind of getting towards that time frame where we're going to have, probably anywhere from 3 to 4 weeks, depending on weather, is going to be combine time. If we're hot and dry, it's going to be a little quicker. If we get cloudy and stay cooler, it might be a little bit longer, but we're probably looking at these beans maybe being within a month. They should probably be combined. This happens to be a 1/8 maturity soybean planted the last few days of April, but on good heavy ground. Some faster ground, you might see even more advancement in the maturity cycle, but I think it's just something to be aware of. We probably aren't surprised, but things have sped along pretty good with all the heat we've had. The late rains we've had here lately, I think it's really going to help our bean yields. We were flowering up until, like in this particular bean that's R6, probably within 2 weeks, last 2 weeks it's probably quit flowering, but just because it's done flowering doesn't mean there's no chance of it adding some yield. Some of those pods that weren't quite fully developed yet, they might still have a chance to abort down from a 3-bean pod down to a 2-bean pod. These rains should help stop that. We also can make bigger beans. If those beans are happy, they'll just make bigger beans, and that's going to help yield obviously as well. And we've had that before where the pod counts don't tell us the whole story on yield determination. So I think we should gain some of that from some of these late rains we've had helping us out. The weather has not been so hot and blistering for the last little while. That should help us as well. But just kind of be aware, taking a look at your fields. You might not even be thinking about mature beans yet, but I know there's going to be some out there that are probably farther along than you expect them to be. So just something to watch for. I think beans have potential to be pretty decent this year. I think the beans, we don't see one of our yield robbers especially on the west part of our territory. White mold is one that we always worry about. Really don't see any of that this year. You can see these beans aren't all that tall. With all that heat and drought stress we had, beans stayed shorter this year. You can see around in this field too, there's a lot of water hemp that's coming through these fields late. Some of these shorter, better standing varieties didn't even canopy all the way, and that's allowed the opportunity for some water hemp, which is so opportunistic, to start sneaking through. Those that weren't quite killed when they were sprayed, they were damaged, but they've still hung on. Or even some late germination, since we didn't have enough rain to activate some of our residuals we applied. But I think it's going to be a good bean crop. Obviously we'll know a lot more once the combines roll, but just wanted to touch on where we're at maturity wise and growth stage wise, and something to watch for in your soybeans. With that, that's this week's Field Friday segment, and we'll see you next week.